Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? I'm delighted to be back in Lisbon, a beautiful city, and Portugal, a beautiful country too. And I come here every year or so, and I was here just a few months ago. And it's a great place to be. But the reason that I want to be here today is because earned value is really, really important. And Steve said something interesting, which you won't know about me. I first got involved in risk management actually 25 years ago in 1986. I was only 6 years old at the time. Everybody knows me as the risk doctor, and the reason I'm involved in risk management is because it really works. It's one of those topics, one of those disciplines where a lot of people say, oh, you know, we tried that, it didn't really work. Well, then you're not doing it properly. Because we all plan to succeed, and the things which will drive us off plan are the risks. And if we could only manage the risks, the potential variations to our plan, then we would succeed more often. So risk management is perhaps the most important thing you can do to guarantee success for your projects, for your business, and I would say more widely for life, for your objectives in life. But what you don't know about me is that 2 years before I found out about risk management, I found out about earned value. And I've been practicing earned value since 1984. And I was using it on major defense projects in the UK. And I'm a real enthusiast for earned value. You might not have known that. And I really believe that earned value works. It's not the most important thing you can do on your projects, because that's risk, of course. But it's the second most important thing. And what I want to do here is to talk about how these two things might connect together in a very practical way. The other thing which I did just want to say in introducing myself is something that Miguel mentioned, which is the link between IPMA and PMI. There is only one project management. Project management is project management. And we are blessed with a variety, with a more than one project management association. And we need to work together. There are only two people in the world who are an honorary fellow of IPMA and a fellow of PMI. And I'm delighted to be one of them. So I bridge both of them together. I'm not a PMI person. Well, I am a PMI person, but I'm also an IPMA person, and delighted to be both. And I think it's great that this particular event is bridging those divides, and we should do that more often. And if the organizations at the headquarters can't sort themselves out, then at the ground level, we need to work together, because we're all project managers, right? So that's and that's what this is. Honorary Fellow of the IPMA and also a PMI Fellow. So now, what can I tell you about earned value and risk management? I can tell you what I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you the basics. I think somebody else could do that, or you could read the books. There's a lot of textbooks around. I want to assume that you understand the basics of what earned value is, knowing where we are, knowing where we want to go. Understanding that if you spent half the time and half the money, you haven't necessarily done half the work, and it's really important for us to know where we are. And also, I'm not going to tell you the basics of risk management. I'm hoping that you'll understand the key ideas, the key words, and what they're both for, and the processes that we can follow. What I do want to do is to talk about some ways in which we can connect the two together. And Steve mentioned a publication that I'd been involved with. I brought just one copy. It was only 2 years ago, actually. It seems ages. But it's this, Interfacing Risk and Earned Value Management. Very small. I'll give you the reference at the end of the presentation. It only costs 10 British pounds, or 12 euros, or $15. And it's quite an important practical document on how we can put these two things together. You don't need to read that. That's a rude comment about your presentation. No, it's just something to remind me. So I think these two things fit together very well. Although I'm interested in ideas, I am essentially a practitioner. And so I want to talk about, I've called it a practical synergy. How can we put these two things together in a way that actually works? What do earned value and risk management have in common? There's quite a lot of things which we're both trying to do in both of these disciplines. The first thing we're trying to do is to support the making of decisions, help project managers, business managers customers, stakeholders, understand which is the best way to move forward from where we are. Both of these things are decision support techniques. I don't know if you know who this person is. He's one of the Roman gods. He's the god of doorways and the god of the new year. His name is Janus. And we name January, the name of the month is after Janus. And Janus has two faces. He looks backwards into the past year, or the past, and he looks forwards into the future. And both earned value and risk management do that. They're understanding the past so that we can move forward into the future. And both of them have that kind of double vision, or you might say two-faced, but we better not say that. Both of them are very focused on objectives. So it's all about what we're trying to achieve. And if you don't understand your objectives in time and cost, or performance or scope, or health and safety and reputation, or any of those things which we have to do, if you don't understand your objectives, you can't do an earned value analysis, and you certainly can't identify and manage risks. And I think that's a really helpful thing for both of these disciplines, to focus us very closely on what we're trying to do. Remind us all the time that it's all about achieving those objectives. Both earned value and risk management can be applied at different levels within the organization. We may be focusing today on the project level, but we can also apply exactly the same techniques at multiple levels within the organization, and we should. And I think it will be interesting if some of those things come out in the conference, and certainly they'll come out in our thinking later on about how earned value can and should be applied beyond the project level. And I think most importantly, these are management techniques. They are not analysis techniques. We talk about earned value analysis and we talk about risk analysis. But what we're really interested in is earned value management. And in risk management, it's about doing something. And one of the things that greatly frustrates me about a lot of these project management techniques is that we analyze and analyze and analyze, and then we write reports, and then we stop. And we don't actually act on those reports. We have to do something, otherwise nothing changes. And both earned value and risk management are management techniques about taking action. So I think there's a huge number of different characteristics that these two disciplines have in common, which means that there should be some synergy. Synergy means where you take two things and you add them together, and the sum is greater than the individual things. So they help each other, but you put them together and they make something bigger. And I think that could be true of earned value and risk management because they share all of these different characteristics. So how might they add together? How might they help each other? Well, in terms of where we are currently, everybody knows what earned value and risk management are. They're well accepted, well defined, and well supported. But there are some other problems with them, and they actually both share the same sets of problems. One of the problems is that people seem to think that you need to have an expert to do it for you, or worse, to do it to you. And that's, there's no ownership. What does the risk manager do? The risk manager manages risk. No. We all manage risk, and we should all be responsible for understanding where we are in our projects and our tasks and taking responsibility for that. These are often seen as optional extras. So we have the real work of the project, and if you're an expert or it's a big project or something special, you can kind of have someone on the side in the project office doing an earned value analysis. But the real project work will continue. And risk management is the same. It's in a separate office somewhere. It doesn't connect to the real project. And these things are not integrated into the overall management of the project. So actually we share the same shortcomings, the same potential problems in the way that we're seen. So there are some good things and some bad things. There are also strengths and weaknesses of both techniques. I don't want to upset only one group of people, so I'm going to try to upset everybody today. What's good and bad about earned value? Well, one of the good things, what it does, is it assumes that by understanding the past, we can predict the future. Well, can we? So Steve said, the quotation was to know where you started and where you want to finish. That's okay, but how do you get from here to there? Is there only one way? Steve said that the project manager should tell the truth. Is there only one truth about my project, about how I go from the beginning to the end? Of course not. It was in the Bible that Pilate, when he was talking to Jesus, he said, "What is truth?" So the project manager tells the truth, but which truth? There are many ways to get from the beginning of the project to the end. If you're halfway through the project and you've done your earned value analysis and you understand your indicators, is that the only way to get to the end of the project by continuing on the path that you're currently on? Of course not. So we assume that past performance will predict the future, but what about change? What about risk in our projects? The uncertain, the things that are unforeseen, the unexpected, when they impact on our project, and the truth changes. What we thought was true is no longer true, so we have to replan. And then what's really important is, what about our actions? We are not going to just carry on as we have before. Because we've done the analysis and we've understood our past performance, of course we're going to do things differently in the future. We make management decisions, and project management is about changing the way we manage the project in future. So although earned value has the strength of saying, well, what has happened to get us to this point, and if we follow that trajectory, where will it take us? That is not the only truth about my project. And things could be different in the future. Maybe things should be different in the future. So is that a problem with earned value in terms of predicting forwards based on the past? Earned value is a rear view mirror. It's a way of driving the car and saying, where did I come from? How did I get to this place? That's okay, that's useful, that's important information if we're to learn, if we're to understand our performance, to understand the good things and the bad things about our project, our structure, our organization, our processes, our teams, our motivation. But it's not the only truth that we need to know. So what about risk management? Well, risk management is very much focused on the future. And so we're saying a risk is an uncertain future event or set of circumstances that, if it occurs, has an effect on achievement of objectives. It's what's out there. That's good, but it's not entirely good. Risk management is not really interested in the past. I don't care how I got here. All I want to know is what's out there ahead of me, and how should I position myself and protect myself and prepare myself for the uncertainties which are lying ahead. So that future focus is a good thing, but it is a bit of a problem, because some of my future problems arose in the past. And if I have no interest in the past and no sight of the past, then I throw away my context. I throw away the opportunity to learn about the future because of what happened in the past. If earned value is a rear-view mirror, then risk management is like a radar, a forward-looking radar that scans the future and says, what is out there, good and bad, opportunities as well as threats. There's a big bad thing over here, I steer away from it. There's a big good thing over here, I steer towards it. So we have two different symbols, two different images of these techniques. Some of them are good and some of them are bad. If we take earned value and the rear view mirror image, the problem with that is if you use it for something else. So, I don't care about my project performance. What do I look like? And some of us are using our earned value indicators to tell the boss what I look like and to improve my performance, improve my visibility, my image. That may not be the right thing to do. Men use rear view mirrors in a different way. It says, when there's nothing else to look at. Anyway, moving swiftly on, we need to be looking forwards. Risk management is about the forward-looking radar. And you can have a great forward-looking radar, but the problem is if you don't use it, if you don't actually look in the right direction, then it doesn't particularly help you, does it? So these techniques are fine. They have strengths, but they also have weaknesses, and we need to use them properly. How can they help each other? I'd like to suggest 3 areas in which earned value management and risk management could work together could act as a synergy where they come together and help each other, and the two together do something more than they can do on their own. Two of them relate to earned value things, where risk can help earned value, and one of them relates to a risk thing, where earned value can help risk. Okay, and these are my suggestions. The first suggestion is, how do we get our base plan, the plan value line, or what we used to call the budgeted cost of work schedule, the BCWS. The second thing is, when we're partway through of our project and we want to predict where we're going to end up, the estimate at completion, how do we do that? Does risk have anything to say about that? And the third thing is there anything that we can find out from earned value that will help us improve our management of risk on the project? So let me talk about those fairly quickly. I guess, as I said, I wasn't going to tell you about the basics, but we all know about the plan value line, or the budgeted cost of work schedule. It says, I'm starting my project here, I'm finishing over here, this is the target. This is what I expect to happen. So I've got cost up here, I've got time along here. As time progresses, I spend my money and I get to the end, on time, on budget. Right? And of course, that always happens, doesn't it? We always put the plan down and then we just follow the plan. Plan the work and work the plan. No. No plan survives first contact with the enemy. As soon as you start actually doing some work on the project, things change. And so our plan value line, we know, is wrong. It's just a starting place. It's saying there is one way, it's feasible, it's possible to get from the beginning to the end. We have found a way. We call it the plan. But we know it's not going to be, unless it's a very small, a very simple, and a very controlled project, that's not going to be the way it works out in reality. So we've got things happening in our project we know are coming down the line, which are different from our plan. Change and risk. So can risk management help us? We're very often in this situation where we understand the starting conditions of our project, and we know where we want to go. It's the bit in the middle which is difficult. And we want to try and get some clarity on that sort of middle part, instead of just saying, well, we hope it'll all be okay. So how can we use risk to help us get a baseline which is more robust, which takes account of future change and future uncertainty? Is there a way in which the risk process can help us get a stronger baseline, a plan value line, that we can trust? I think there is. How about this as a little process? The first thing is to understand what we're trying to do. We produce a work breakdown structure and we cost it with no contingency. Now, we don't want anybody saying, well, of course, we might need a little bit more here, a little bit more here. You end up with double counting if you put in contingency in your base plan. So let's take the contingency out. We'll deal with that in a different way. Then what we need to do is to get a properly costed and resourced schedule. This is all very basic. And then we start looking at the risks. Well, before we look at risks, we want to look at this. What about estimating uncertainty? Estimating uncertainty is not the same as risk. Estimating uncertainty is saying, I know what I'm going to do. I know what I plan to spend in terms of time and money on each of my activities or tasks. It could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less. So we have variability in our planned activities, estimating uncertainty. These are not risks. Risks are something else. Risks are unplanned, unknown, unexpected future events which, if they happen, could have a positive or negative effect on achievement of our objectives. This is not variability on known tasks. This is other tasks, things that we hadn't planned to do, which might happen. And so risks are different from estimating uncertainty. And we need to identify both. We need to identify them, assess them, and develop some responses. Basic risk management. Okay, now what are we going to do? Well, what we really need to understand is how do these risks and this estimating uncertainty affect this base schedule? So we ought to do some kind of analysis, some kind of Monte Carlo simulation perhaps, which is saying let's use that technique, the basic Monte Carlo approach, to analyze the effect of both estimating uncertainty and risks, both threats and opportunities, on our base costed schedule. Okay? Now, that's fine. What that will do is give us a range of possible outcomes of what could happen on our project if everything went really badly wrong. So with our estimating uncertainty, things always cost more or took longer than our base plan, and all of the bad risks happened. So the threats occurred, and we had extra things to do which cost us time and money. So we would get a worst case. And of course, there's a best case, where all of our estimating uncertainty was on the good side, on the optimistic side, and none of the threats happened, and lots of opportunities happened, and we ended up coming in early and under budget. Could happen. In fact, the truth could be anywhere in between those two extremes. So what Monte Carlo simulation gives us is a range of possible outcomes, and from that range we could pick one as our risk-adjusted baseline. We should pick one as our risk-adjusted baseline. A baseline for planned value, or the budgeted cost of work scheduled, which takes proper account of risk. It would be normal to use the expected value line within that particular range of outcomes, but you could use some other line. Now here it is in words. If you want to see it in a picture, we could say, well, here we are starting our project. Where are we going to end up? This is like Steve's spot the ball competition. Here's the ball. This is the number 7. That's where we want to be. We want to be on time, on budget. But that's not the only possible outcome. When we do our Monte Carlo simulation, we find there are hundreds or thousands of possible results. Now you do Steve's spot the ball competition, it's impossible. You don't know which of those you're going to end up with, because each one of these arises from a different combination of estimating uncertainty and potential risks. And the Monte Carlo simulation will produce an estimate or an analysis of all of these possibilities. And there may be hundreds of them or thousands of them. We might put some kind of boundary around this. This is called an eyeball plot. Or if you're American, we call it a football plot. But obviously, we know that that's not really football. In America, football is played by men with odd-shaped balls. Okay, that was an English joke. So there's a range of possible end results. And of course, if we start here, where we haven't spent any money and haven't spent any time, how do we get from here to there? What does the planned value line look like? Well, of course, there isn't just one line from here to there. There might be a kind of a really good line where we start here and we end up with the earliest possible end date and the cheapest possible end cost. That's possible. Of course, it could all go horribly wrong. And we could end up being as late as possible and as overspent as possible. And there might be some sort of expected case which ends up in the middle of this particular range of possibilities. Which one should we use for our planned value line? Out of all of that, and of course there are millions of other lines in between these two boundaries, an infinite number of possibilities. That's the truth. That's the reality of your project and of my project, because of estimating uncertainty and because of risks. Well, we could just say, let's use this middle line. That's the easy thing. That's if on average, this is where we're going to be. And that's what most people would recommend. You don't have to do that. You could perhaps take the 80th percentile, which is going to be somewhere in between the red and the black lines, which you would have more confidence in actually choosing and believing that you could follow. The right answer, well, there is no right answer. The right answer is a question of judgment. It's a management decision. The question is, how much risk are we comfortable with when we're setting the baseline for our project? Do we want to allow a 50% chance of failure, which is what the red line will give you? A 50-50 chance? Are we comfortable with that? Do we want just a 20% chance of failure, in which case we pick the 80% line? These are real decisions and important decisions, which risk will help us take. A risk analysis will help us set a credible baseline which takes proper account of the uncertainty and risk that faces our project. We should do that. That should be just standard, basic earned value analysis starting point to do your Monte Carlo analysis using estimating uncertainty and risks and pick a line. Yes, obvious. So here's my first recommendation. Do an integrated cost-time risk model. So a Monte Carlo simulation with both cost and time in it. And then use either the expected spend profile or some other percentile based on your confidence level. And use that as your planned value baseline. Is it easy? Was that reasonable as a recommendation? Good. This is basics, isn't it? This is simple stuff. Maybe you don't think so. All right, here's another suggestion. And the second suggestion is like this. How do you know when we're partway through the project how to get from the beginning to the end? Or get from, not the beginning, sorry, from this point, from time now, to the end? Is there just one way that says, okay, we're spending at this rate, we've got to here, this is our earned value line, not doing, why does everybody always show it this way round? Not doing so well. But from here, we're going to go from here, and I guess we're just going to track up here, and we're going to end up over here somewhere. Guaranteed? Well, not guaranteed, because we're going to do something about that, aren't we? We're going to say, well, if we didn't change anything, this is where it's going to go. But we can change things. We should change things. We don't want to be late. We don't want to be overspent. So we're going to take some management action. And there'll be other risks that could affect us. So actually what we could do is to do exactly the same thing as what I showed previously, record where we are now, calculate our earned value to date, and then re-estimate from where we are now to the end. And then look again at the risks from where we are now to the end. Use that forward-looking radar to say, what's out there now? And then take some judgments, update our risk model with with revised estimates, repeat the Monte Carlo simulation, and pick a line. We can do exactly the same thing partway through the project. We should. We should be updating our risk assessment to take account of the new situation. And it would look like this. What we're saying is from here, we've still got this range of possible spot the ball options for the end. And it could be that from where we are now, we'll end up doing well, or we could end up doing badly. But we could say there's an expected line. Which out of these, this is the ball? Which is the ball that we're going to finish at? Which is our estimate at completion? There are 1,000 possibilities. We could say, on average, it'll be here. Maybe that's a good place to be. If you want more confidence, you know how to do that because we have the range of options. We can pick an 80th percentile point, or we could have something more challenging at 40 or 30%. The calculation is there to enable you to make an intelligent decision. Using the risk model, using standard basic risk analysis, easy, simple risk analysis, which anybody could do. You don't need to have a doctorate in statistics. This is easy stuff in order to modify or inform our earned value predictions. Easy. So second recommendation, do it again to get our estimate at completion. Do it repeatedly throughout the project. Use an updated risk model so that we get an updated earned value forecast. Okay? Easy. Now, there's two simple ways that the risk process can help the earned value process. Can the earned value process help us in risk management? Well, I think it can. If risk management works, then our performance will match the plan. That's what we're after. So we're supposed to be saying there are things that could take us off track, make us late and overspent and kill people and damage reputation and, and make our benefits and our performance lower. We want to see those and stop them happening, avoid and minimize the threats. There are also things that would help us to save time, save money, enhance performance, the opportunities. We want to chase those things down so that we can use the savings from the opportunities to offset the threats that we couldn't manage. And if we can do that, if we get risk management right, there'll be fewer surprises, we minimize the threats, maximize the opportunities, meet our targets. Great. So what happens when that doesn't happen? Because it doesn't happen. Because we have unforeseen risks, we have unmanageable risks, we have unexpected risks. Things happen that weren't according to our plan. Well, we know when we're off plan because earned value tells us. The earned value analysis tells us when we're not on track. So the earned value indicators, and I've mentioned CPI and SPI, but all of them are telling us something about the effectiveness of our risk process. We could use that. We could watch those earned value indicators and use them to inform the risk process. So what can they tell us? If we say that they're like a target, obviously if they're less than 1, we're not doing so well. Okay? We understand that. That means the risk process isn't working. There are bad things happening to take us away from the target, which we ought to deal with. So we should focus our risk process on those bad things. The risk process is clearly missing threats. Otherwise, our performance wouldn't be below plan. And in the same way, if we're finding the earned value indicators showing us that our performance is ahead of plan, then the risk process is working, and maybe we could actually explore the upside of uncertainty. We could focus the risk process on finding the opportunities, because we've got some leeway. We've got some room for maneuver already because performance is ahead of plan. I suppose that's obvious. What would happen if our indicators were way off? Like, the CPI and the SPI was 0.1 or 20. Gosh, what does that tell you about the risk process? Well, I think it's very interesting. If you've got them very, very low or very, very high, it might not be a problem with the risk process, it might be a problem with the baseline. It might be a problem with the scope. It might be a problem with the project itself. I think that might be very indicative of something very wrong with the project, not just the risk process. So we've got this kind of range of variance in our indicators which will help us to shape the risk process, but the extremes might tell us something else. So if we wanted to see that as a picture, here we've got either of the indicators, CPI or SPI, it doesn't matter, and this is how well is our risk process doing. It's good and effective, or it's ineffective. If we find we have our indicators are this way, it suggests that risk may be uncontrolled, and we need to focus on getting the risk process back under control. If we're up here, then it suggests that we're doing quite well with risk, and risk is well controlled, and we can maybe afford to spend some time looking for upside opportunities. But what if we're below here, or above here? Interesting. This is what I think. I don't know what you think. This is what I think it tells us. If we have a very high indicator, we're so far ahead of plan that the plan is wrong. That's what I think it tells us. That maybe there's some sort of problem and the risk process is actually no use at all. And I think we might find the same over here. That if we have very low values, the risk process we've got a wrong target. I think that might be interesting. We could use that if we're doing some kind of analysis of progress, monitoring our indicators as you would as time goes by. We could actually set thresholds across here in the same way that you would with process indicators. We could say there's a sort of a region of normal variation where you would expect the CPI and the SPI to go up and down, and if they vary between some limits, I've suggested 0.9 or 1.25, if we're in here, it's okay. But what happens if we break out of there, as we have done quite a lot here with the SPI? What do those regions tell us? We might say that down here, the risk process is out of control. Things are going wrong in the schedule. So the risk process needs to be sharpened up, needs to be focused in the time aspect. We need to be looking at schedule risk. I nearly said schedule risk. I always confuse it. In England, we say schedule, and then we say school. I don't know. So anyway, schedule, that time thing. So if we're down here, then we're in trouble on the time side. If we're way down here, we really need to be looking at threats. If we're up here, we need to be looking at opportunities. Or if you want to take the kind of the target approach, we could say we need to look at the threats. This is bad. If your CPI and SPI are in this direction, we're in trouble. If we're over here, fantastic. We can exploit the opportunities. We can look for the upside. This is great. We've actually got some room for maneuver here. If we're over here, then clearly we're going to be up on time and down on cost. which means we need to look at the cost risk and we can spend time to do it because we're ahead on time and behind on cost. Or down here, what we can do, we need to look at the time risk and we need to spend some contingency to do that because we're ahead on cost and behind on time. So what we're doing is focusing the risk process using that combination of CPI and SPI. But don't forget there's the potential for these extreme positions where things are way out and we might need to think about doing something completely different. So if we're in extremis, then we need to look at the baseline plan. Maybe it's not the risk process, maybe it's the plan that's wrong. So hopefully this will give you some idea of the way that we can use the earned value analysis and earned value indicators to help us on the risk side with getting some kind of targeted view of this is what it's telling me about my cost performance and my time performance, and the risk process needs some adjustment in order to address those things. So a recommendation from here, what we're saying is we need to know what those thresholds are. I've suggested some numbers here, and then calculate our indicators, plot the trends, and use those trends to make changes in the risk process if we breach the thresholds. As I said here, if we're low, focus on threats. If we're high, focus on opportunities. So recommendation here would be to use these indicators not just as project performance indicators, but to use them as risk process effectiveness indicators and to make changes where appropriate. Okay? So 3, what I think are practical things we can do, actual practical ways of using basic earned value to help the risk process and basic risk management to help the earned value process. Synergy is where you put these two things together, where you add them up and they make more than they were on their own. So I think what we've seen is that these are complementary techniques. It's not that you're either an earned value specialist or a risk specialist. We should be project controls specialists. We need to keep our projects under control. And to do that, we need to know how we got where we are. But we also need to know what might happen ahead of us so that we can get to the end. We need both to look behind and forwards. We need the rear view mirror and the forward-looking radar. We need earned value and we need risk management. Both of them are trying to help us make better decisions. And both of them are trying to produce the best outcomes by taking corrective action as we go forward. These two things have genuine synergy because they're aiming at the same thing and they can help each other to achieve their aims. So what we need to do is to look back with our earned value, look forward with our risk, and use all of that information to help us achieve our goals. When we think of synergy, there's a number of different ways of just focusing on what that might mean. Salt and pepper, you've got the wrong slides here. One possibility is to say there are opposites. There are things which come together which help us to actually achieve our goals. When I see salt and pepper, I think of fish and chips. That's because I'm English. You know, they're different, but together they're better. Of course, you don't think of fish and chips. You know, in Portugal we think of bacalhau, right? Bacalhau and bacalhau Lisboa. Another way of thinking about this is people. So maybe you might think of people who are complementary. Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie are so complementary, we call them Brangelina. You know, they're just like one. Or maybe in Europe we have a slightly different view of complementary. It's the Mercosi couple. Earned value and risk management could be like this. We could say, yeah, there are different ways of viewing our project. We could say there's an earned value perspective, there's a risk perspective. But if we bring them together, what we create is a benefits perspective, is actually being able to achieve the goal in the best possible way. And that's the synergy that we're really looking for. So I hope you found that helpful. The book will help you out. Here's the link, apm.org.uk. Then the name of the book, Interfacing Risk and Earned Value Management.asp. As I say, £10 from Amazon. If you happen to be an APM member, you can have a free download. I hope you found those ideas interesting and useful. I hope they're things that you could actually practically do yourselves, or with very small sort of increase in your skills on one side or the other. I think just like IPMA and PMI, we shouldn't be separating ourselves and saying, well, I'm one or the other. The same is true with risk and earned value. We all want our projects to succeed. These are helpful techniques. They both help in different ways, but using them both together, then we have real power which can really help us to be successful. So thank you very much for your attention.